As a reminder, you might need to unmute her cell phone number.
Cynthia, can you unmute her cell phone number?
Okay, Commissioner, or
What's your number again?
It's the 470-547.
okay, it's showing that it is. Commissioner, Mr. Arrington, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so who are we trying to get to speak? I'm sorry.
Cochran-Johnson.
Oh, okay. Let me try again.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
You are now.
Great.
So Commissioner, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do in District 7 and how you work with the community.
Okay, it's as if there's something that auto mutes me, so hopefully you can hear me now. Am I good?
You're
Yes.
good.
Great, and I apologize. I don't want to take up unnecessary time. Most of you on this call, because this is a DeKalb event, know me as your commissioner. Of course, I'm one of two at-large commissioners, so I have a very diverse district. I have everything from the southernmost tip of Dunwoody to Doraville, Tucker, Stone Mountain, Stonecrest, Lithonia, Pine Lake, Ellenwood, unincorporated DeKalb. With that being said, HOAs are increasingly important because we are seeing communities, and I'm so grateful to say, that have an interesting community like never before. People are concerned with the upkeep of their community. They're concerned with code compliance and ensuring that homes are properly maintained. And I'm really excited about that. There may be some of you that are on this call that are in the Water's Edge area, because that's the Rockbridge Coalition. And I do know that there are some concerns about the power of HOAs. So I'm sure here tonight, since we have two Esquires here with us, we will talk about the good and the bad. Because as I've received calls in the office due to adverse conditions that have been created by HOAs that are less desirable, I'm finding that we need to make sure that we have good laws and policies that are in place, because some HOAs, we are receiving what we've been given. And I've had that conversation with law, but you all need to make sure before you file HOA laws and regulations that they are in compliance with law, so that you are able to properly enforce. But with that said, I look forward to the conversation. I represent each and every one of you. And as it plays out, if anyone needs to reach out, I'm sure we'll get to that point separately.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Arrington, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I know you're involved with the HOA law and in helping communities.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for the invite. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Marvin Arrington. Good evening, Commissioner Johnson. Always a pleasure to see you and work with you in serving the citizens of the state of Georgia. I am a commissioner in Fulton County, but I am also a practicing attorney. I've been practicing for 26, maybe 27 years now, since 1996. So I am excited to be here. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit organization called the HOA Alliance. And we've hosted numerous HOA boot camps throughout the state of Georgia and in DeKalb County with Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, Larry Johnson and Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. And so again, just glad to be here tonight to share some of my expertise. We believe that, you know, if everyone knows the rules, that is the best way for everyone to get along. And so we just try to help push the education envelope.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Randy, if you would introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you do.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Randy Williams. I am a practicing attorney, and my firm, one of our specialty areas is real estate litigation. We represent in that capacity. We represent HOAs. We also represent homeowners who may have disputes with their HOAs. I come to this practice area with almost 20 years of experience in real estate. As a former real estate broker who used to manage HOAs, I find this topic fascinating, and I believe that some of the issues that we may touch on today can be helpful in assisting homeowners in understanding the value of an HOA, but also the opportunities and risks when HOAs, those who are in charge of carrying out the duties of an HOA, when they may need some more education around how to carry out those functions. And hopefully we'll hear some really good stories about HOAs who carry out their functions well and have the support of their communities. So I think this is a very timely conversation. I thank you all for whoever was involved in having me a part of this panel. And I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for introducing yourself. Let's start with a base question here, and I want each one of you guys to answer this question, and don't take too long, but just kind of answer it. Is, in your experience, what are the characteristics of a strong community, or a strong HOA, or a strong neighborhood? I just kind of want to set the base of what are those characteristics of a good, strong community. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, you want to start with that one?
Absolutely. Community starts.
Try again, Commissioner.
Okay, there's something that mutes me every time I unmute myself.
Cynthia,
Hopefully
can
you
you
guys
stay-
can.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can-
Cynthia,
We
stay
can-
close to her number so we can keep her open.
I will.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Thank-
Commissioner.
Honestly, everything begins with the individual and people. One of the things that disturbs me most is that government, in many instances, has been left to mandate, shall I say, morality and decency. Some of the things that we deal with as it relates to the inherent right of homeownership requires you to do certain things. Unfortunately, people don't always do that, and sometimes we need reminders. But for me, the most important element of the HOA are the people and their desire to have the best possible community and to submit themselves to doing what is right and subject, of course, to governance when there is an oversight, and getting yourself back in line and in order as quickly as possible. Because what I want people to know on this call, when you talk about HOAs, we are a community. So what you do is greater than self. It affects our community.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Arrington?
Well, I'm gonna think, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson hit the nail on the head. It's all about the neighbors. It's all about the people, right? We're talking about neighborhoods. Communities are made up of neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are made up of neighbors. When you have neighbors, you have to have respect for your fellow neighbors, because you want them to have respect for you and your land and your property. And so I think it is all about the neighbors. I think it's also about respect for your other neighbors. And one of the things that you do, if there is a tension between individual rights and group rights, and when you submit yourself to a community association, whether that is an HOA or condominium association, a POA, or a civic association, you give up some of your individual rights for the greater rights of the group. And so that is one of the tensions that we see playing out time and time again with HOAs.
That is a very interesting point. So we'll come back to that. Randy, what do you think the characteristics of a strong HOA or neighborhood is?
Yeah, so just to piggyback on what has already been said, I think one of the most important features is communication. And that happens, I find, most effectively when neighbors know each other. So there's many communities where people may not even know who lives next door to them. And I think if you can improve that and foster the ability for neighbors to know each other and not feel as if it's an invasion of privacy to know who your neighbor's name and maybe to even have their cell phone number, their email address, some way of communicating with them so that if something is going on in the community, you can talk to each other. You can, if you see something strange, something odd, you know who to call. If there's a weird car in your neighbor's yard, is not being nosy, it's just being concerned to say, hey, that car's been there for 5 days. That's not my neighbor's car. So having that open line of communication, I believe, is very important. But I think that starts with at least making an attempt to get to know who your neighbors are. And I think that's an activity that HOAs can foster through their boards by having events and having outings or something that brings the community together, brings those neighbors together where they can have the opportunity to get to know one another. And I think that can foster a whole lot of positive things that come from that open line of communication with people that you know.
That's a good point. So we say people, know your neighbors, know your neighbors, know your neighbors. But for a lot of communities, that is easier said than done. Have you seen ways, or can you talk about some ways that you've seen neighbors work together? I mean, it is difficult to get a group of neighbors to come out and do something. Sometimes it's difficult to get neighbors to vote for themselves. It's difficult to get neighbors to be block captains. It's difficult, I've tried it also. So I'm just wondering if you guys have any ideas and thoughts on how to get neighbors to engage with each other, because it doesn't happen all the time. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, you want to take a stab at that one first?
I will. I will say, and hopefully I can be heard now.
Yes, you can.
But great. In our community, the one thing that we have, and of course it is an opt-in, but we have 100% participation. We have a community directory. I can truly say that I know the bulk of my neighbors. And what I'm finding, honestly, is that, for lack of better words, but because of the time we live in, desperate times often calls for desperate measures. We are now forced to know each other. I know personally, I live in a great community. I love DeKalb. I truly mean that. But we have had a rash of burglaries. You must talk to each other and communicate about what is going on around you. I honestly, in 2018, had my car stolen from in front of my house. And to this day, I'm still baffled by that. That a whole car goes missing and you see it again on the news a week later. But during that time I was active, we paid the HOA dues. But it was amazing to me that we had not had the conversation because I wasn't the first in our community. And I never knew that. So communities must communicate what is happening, because if one of us if we're under attack, we all are. And it becomes extremely important so that we can safeguard against predators, because it's unfortunate, but they are out there. And for many communities, not everyone on this call may have an HOA, but everyone has a neighbor. So it's time we start.
The reason why I have been so turned off to it was, number one, I feel like the board can take more responsibility.
Cynthia, can you mute Dale? Go ahead, Commissioner, finish up.
Well, I will leave it at that. I'm seeing more and more a need. And not only that, I could even sit here and go into code compliance. And I know, Ms. Attorney Arrington, you are handling or some dear friends of mine, Brandon. And even when it comes to blight in our communities, there's some things that just ought not be, because for communities and homes to reach the point in some communities that I see in DeKalb, it indicates there's been years of omission.
Mhm.
Years of omission, because you don't get where we are in 5 years, not even 10 years in some instances. So for me, HOAs are the first line of defense in creating the communities that we expect for ourselves. But if you don't have an HOA and you have a problem, then reach out to us. I know personally as an elected official, and we will get code compliance out and other agencies that can deal with issues that oftentimes HOAs are responsible for.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Arrington, how do people work together in your area? What tricks do your neighbors use? Commissioner Cochran-Johnson talked about a directory, which I've never thought about. You have any suggestions to get neighbors to work together and to know each other?
Absolutely. We did in our community, it was developer controlled, and developer was getting ready to sell and get some more people involved. And so we ran for office, a friend of mine and I, one of the other homeowners. We ran for office. And one of the things that we did, I guess one, as we were running for office, and then two, after we got in office. But when we were running for office, my subdivision has one way in and one way out. And so instead of walking door to door, we stood at the front on Saturday morning and gave out coffee and donuts
Okay.
from Starbucks, right? And so we used that as a way to gain signatures for our petition, right? And we didn't get enough the first Saturday, so we went back a second Saturday and a third Saturday. So that is certainly one way. And then on Mother's Day, we stood out front and gave away roses to all the mothers that came through the gates.
Okay.
And so there are ways to engage the community other than fried chicken and watermelon, right? Obviously, providing food is a good thing. And, I was being facetious when I say that, right? But,
Right.
you want to provide an atmosphere. You want to make a festive atmosphere. And then once you get elected, you want to host events. One of the things that we did when we got elected to the board, because for me, I don't believe in foreclosing on my neighbor's house, right? So the first thing we did was offer 30 days of waiving all late fees and interest. Just pay what you owe, right? And then when that 30 days ran out, we ran it again for another 30 days. And then when that 30 days ran out, we ran it again for another 30 days. So by that time, we had given everyone 90 days to either work out a payment plan or to make payment. And so as long as you did that within that time, and then really, even after that, as long as you attempted to make an arrangement with us, then we, didn't really go after them. And so, and I think people feel involved, and the more people feel involved, the more they will want to contribute. And so I think it's about creating the atmosphere and the environment, and remembering that, after someone comes home from a long, hard day at work, the last thing they want to see is a letter talking about they left the trash can out and the basketball goal out. And a lot of times you could just, I think what Attorney Williams said about communication is so important, because a lot of times it could just be a phone call. It could just be, hey man, you left your trash can out, take it up, without getting a notice. And so I think, the most important thing is we have to remember to be neighborly.
You bring up a good point about being neighborly. So instead of calling the HOA and turning them in, I should knock on their door and say, hey man, what about this? Can I help you?
Well,
with
if you have the relationship, right? If you know them, I think that was the important part. I think that someone said, maybe Attorney Williams, having those relationships, knowing your neighbors, so that when you make that call, I'd say, hey, Lance, it's Lance. I know who you are. You're not a stranger to me. You're not, someone that I don't know.
Gotcha. Attorney Williams, what are your thoughts on how you've seen neighbors work together to make their communities better? Because that is a problem, getting people to work together.
Well, I think it's a part of understanding, right? I think Attorney Commissioner Arrington hit on it when he said that, people have lives, right? And for a board, maybe the HOA it's really big in there because they're carrying out daily functions of a board. But for the homeowners, it's where they live, right? And so sometimes when people are not engaged, it's maybe because and I sit on a board on my HOA's board, and so I'm gonna say we in that respect. I will say that sometimes we as the board may not have done the outreach in a way that reaches the homeowners that we're trying to reach. Oftentimes, board members are all volunteers, right? They have their own things going on too, and sometimes I've seen it where those board members, they set their schedules and what they're going to do, they centered around their free time, right? And so sometimes that may not be the same time that most homeowners in your community are available. So, when are you having board meetings? When are you having, community meetings? How do you go about setting the day for an activity that you're wanting members to participate in? And that's where it goes back to, again, knowing your community, knowing your neighbors, being involved in a way that just says, hey, I know my neighbor is a nurse. She works, the third shift as a nurse. And she sleeps during the afternoon. So it would be wrong if I'm really trying to engage her to wait until, 7 p.m. because that's when I got off of work to try to call her and tell her about an event, right? So having that kind of understanding, I think, goes a long way. And it shows your community that, hey, we are engaged in this together. What can we do collectively? Maybe everybody can't make every event. I know in our community, we do our pool opening parties, right? And we invite, normally amenities are closed off to people who are delinquent in their assessments. But for our opening pool parties, we invite everybody. So we want those who are even delinquent to see, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is why we need you to be compliant. This is why we need you to pay your assessments timely so that we can have these types of things. And I find that when communities are able to see what an HOA is doing and there's openness and transparency, then they don't mind, paying. They don't mind doing their part, and they don't just ignore the HOA. And so to that extent, I say that you're going to be most effective when you first, again, establish that connection with your neighbors that can then broaden out into much more effective policies that allow you to engage people in such a way that they don't feel uncomfortable talking to their neighbor, right? I sometimes we've in the past have gotten communications from one neighbor who wants to talk about their neighbor next door. And one of the first questions I would always ask is, have you tried talking to them? No, I don't know them people. They seem like they're not friendly. So maybe as a board, as a member of a committee, maybe what we can do then is help foster that connection to say, hey, neighbor one, meet neighbor two. I know you both. I know you both are good people. So let me help bridge that gap and let you all know that, look, neighbor one is not mean. She's just tired. She just worked the third shift. She comes out, checks her mail, and goes back in and getting herself ready. So we can help dispel some of those misunderstandings in order to foster this open dialogue and communication that I think will make every community that much better. Okay.
Well, thank you. I mean, so far we talked about people get to know people and people working together, and this I don't want to say kumbaya type of thing, but how do we say if those things are not in place? And let's talk a little bit about conflict resolution. Because it happens all the time. It happens all around us. So how do we resolve conflicts between, or how do we have a discussion, but say between neighbors and HOA boards, and then neighbors to neighbors, because neighbors have conflicts with each other. I don't know that neighbor next door, so I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to just turn them in. So how do we resolve conflict? And attorney, I'll start with you, then we'll go back the other way.
Sure. For conflict resolution, again, I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but I think all of these things are made easier when you know people. So if I know Lance and I can, say, hey, Lance, what's going on with, like as Attorney Arrington said, what's going on with your trash can? Remember, we got to bring those things in. That conversation goes by much easier. However, there are going to be disputes, right? There are going to be people who just come to topics from a very different perspective. And I think what we have to do is somehow get to a point where we can respect and understand that where you stand may not have any ulterior motives behind it. It may just be that, hey, I think this is my way of processing, and Lance might think something completely different. But we can respect each other. And once you have that respect, sometimes it helps to foster this understanding that, hey, Lance isn't coming from a place where he's trying to harm me. He isn't doing what he's doing because he doesn't like me. That's just, he likes red better than blue. And,
Gotcha.
and when I asked him which was the best color, he said red. I said blue. Well, we can respect each other and figure out a way, how can we incorporate both of our likes into one thing? Maybe one week we fly a red flag, next week we fly a blue flag, so that kind of communication is what I think HOAs and their boards can be most effective at. Some communities have boards where the people just are really strong in enforcement. They believe that their role is to be the enforcers, making sure your grass isn't, over a half an inch or that, that kind of thing. Everything is clean and all that. But sometimes you may not understand how they came to be that way, right? Maybe they are coming from a community that was so run down that they had to go into an enforcement mode to build it back up. And they just never relinquished themselves from that perspective, that maybe now the community is doing well. Maybe they can now focus on something else. So having transparency in a board with the community members also helps the homeowners to understand, well, how did you make that decision? How did you come to decide that my shutters are the wrong color? What was the thought process behind that? And once you are able to articulate a reasonable explanation besides because we're the board and we said so, then you are then able to get buy-in. You're able to have people respect those decisions, as Attorney Arrington said, without running into the courthouse, to
Right.
have somebody's home foreclosed on.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Arrington, you want to take a stab at that conflict resolution when neighbors just don't get along, and how can we all get along?
So litigation is always the last option. It should be the only option, once you have exhausted all other options, right? Litigation is expensive, it's time consuming, and it's emotionally draining, right? And there's nothing worse than coming home every night to your house where you're paying a mortgage and you got to deal with a headache dealing with the HOA, right? Or with someone not following the HOA rules if you're on the board. And so conflict resolution is key. I think we need to have more. I think we need to have the state legislature look at some changes. One of the problems that we have in the state of Georgia, there are over 3 million homeowners or residents living in community associations in over 12,000 community associations. And there are 12,000 different set of rules. Each association has its own set of rules. And so I think we need some more uniformity in the rules as one of the ways to help. We certainly definitely need to try mediation. I think that perhaps there should be mediation written into the Declaration of Protective Covenants and the other governing documents like the bylaws. And frankly, you know, we have a workers' comp court because we don't want employees suing employers. And so I think we should maybe even look at an HOA court. Because if we don't want employees suing employers, I don't think we want neighbors suing neighbors either. And so that is one of the things that we need to address, and it needs to be done really on a statewide level. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and I could do it on a county by county level, but you know, it's 159 counties in Georgia, and you know, with over 3 million Georgians and over 12,000 of these homeowners associations, it just needs to be tackled. And frankly, it really needs to be tackled at the federal level because it's the same issues in Florida, in Arizona, in California, right?
Okay.
Where you see a lot of these HOAs and condominium associations. And so we really got to address these laws. One of the things that happens is you get someone on the board and then you can never get another quorum. And so then that person is trapped into a position that they would love to get out of and give to somebody else, but they can't get a quorum. And so you can't have an election. And so we need some rules that allow for deviations from the rules for quorum. If you can't reach an election for a year or 2 years, or if you can't get a quorum after 3 years, you ought to be able to allow to let the people at the meeting vote. I mean,
Right.
otherwise you're not going to ever get a quorum unless you go start giving out coffee and donuts and you walk into the meeting like I did with 60 proxies. There were
Yeah.
60 people in the meeting. I got 30 votes out of those 60, and then I had another 60 proxies. So it was 90 to 120.
You know,
So
you bring up a great point. I've never thought about, you know, reaching the ability to reach a quorum. It's not just the neighbors who want to change. The board is trapped as well. So they're probably looking at it from a different perspective. I sure would love to get off this board, but I'm trapped because we can't get a quorum.
yes, yes. And like you say, the neighbors are mad because they're like, oh, well, they just want to stay there. And so it's a double-edged sword, which is why mediation, alternative dispute resolution is certainly a good option. And frankly, it ought to be mandated by the state. And there is some talk of an ombudsman. I think that would be great. An ombudsman would be someone that submit the plan to, and then also payment plans, right? You could owe your HOA $2,500, and you could not be able to pay that $2,500 in a lump sum payment. But if they gave you 12 months, you might be able to pay it. Well,
Gotcha.
there's no automatic payment plan. They could just say, okay, well, you can't pay it all right now. We're going to foreclose. And to me, that's just, you know, some things may be legal, but that doesn't mean they're right, right? Slavery was legal, but it wasn't right. And somebody been paying on their house for 20, 30 years, and you want to go in and try to foreclose on their house, you know, for that just doesn't sit well with me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You make some good points. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, what about this conflict resolution and how can we all get along?
Oh, well, let me say, and State Representative Viola Davis is with us because she and
Yes.
I have had conversations concerning matters that were brought to me by Water's Edge community. Because whatever we do, I want it to be decent and in order. And, you know, it is a sad day when community is in conflict with the organ that should be representing it, okay? Now, anytime I hear the word conflict resolution, Mr. Hammonds, I get very cautious because I have seen things go left in my 4 years, 5 months, and 1 day as a commissioner. I wish people could talk to each other and easily resolve issues. But when you've said something, and let's be clear, you know, you have to have a level of comfort to talk to people. But I believe very strongly, probably more so than the two Esquires here in the letter of the law. You know, that's why I passed the, laws here related to gas and convenience stores and dollar stores, because I don't want to go back and forth with you on what needs to be done. I want us to have clarity. It's written, it's expressed, and then I want you to do it. But I'm also human enough to understand that in life, we all have, as they say in law, extenuating and mitigating circumstances. So I never want to remove the human side. So, you know, Attorney and Councilman Arrington was absolutely correct when he said that, you know, HOAs shouldn't be in a perfect world taking homes. And I have seen that be the case recently. So the first thing that I urge HOAs to do is make sure you have good laws. I was recently contacted by a very upscale community that has an HOA, and a neighbor chose to paint the house teal and black. Well, the HOA could have had covenants against that in terms of restriction of color, but some things you don't think you have to tell folks. And in all honesty, it's those things that will come back to haunt you in some instances. So whatever it is you desire to create that community that you want, put it in writing so that you can enforce those covenants and conditions equitably amongst all people. But again, when people fail to upkeep their property, of course, you know, DeKalb County can't get involved with forcing any individual to pay HOA dues. But if you have homes that have high grass, weeds, open storage, chipped paint, shutters falling off, everything that I've just said to you is a code violation, broken windows and glass. These are things that you can contact me for, and I'm going to move you right out of the equation. And we're going to get code compliance involved. And that in no way is a reflection on anyone on this call. It just allows us to handle the problem, because I don't want anyone on here to go left with a neighbor who doesn't understand the importance of general maintenance and upkeep of their property.
Very good points. So we need rules, and we need to enforce those rules, that we know we have to work together. So it's kind of a slippery slope in places. Let me ask the panel here. And I'll ask this question this way, especially our two elected officials. And what's the, you know, we call you guys all the time about issues that we have in our neighborhoods. How can we more effectively work with you to help you to serve us, or help you help us? You know, do we just call you, or do we handle it ourselves? I mean, how should that relationship look? And I'll start with you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. We'll go back the other way. How do we work with you? Do we just call you?
For me, it's as simple. Anyone on this call, if you've dealt with me, it's as simple as an email or a phone call. I like emails more because I believe in a chain of accountability. So it helps me from an administrative standpoint on my side of the aisle. But it's really simple. Just tell me what's going on. There was a person here who said, can we help with rotten wood? Absolutely. These are things that, again, when you see communities that where homes are in such bad repair, these are things, and it's really a sad situation, because I would like to believe that people will upkeep property, and when we know better and we appreciate our home as an asset, that there are certain things that should happen. But there are some people who simply need encouragement, and that's what we're here for. So reach out to me, to our office. I'm very easy to find, big glasses, DeKalbCountyGA.gov. And as soon as I hear from you, I'm on it. Now, do know that it's a process, but I do also see that we have, I I believe Senator Gloria Butler had joined us. Yes, she's also here. And I
Okay.
know the issue of HOAs is front and center with the General Assembly because of incidents that have occurred and the concern that has been raised. And I will say to you, Councilman Arrington, I'm happy to see you in the space that you are because someone needs to own it, so to speak, because I have received many calls of concern. And as you said, with 159 counties in the state of Georgia and around 12,000 different HOAs, and everyone has different rules, we have to be careful what we write. And I urge each one of you to definitely engage an attorney in the drafting of your bylaws for your community, because those bylaws literally govern whatever actions it is you have the authority to take. And we almost need, and perhaps, and now I'm going to call you Attorney Arrington, almost a toolkit for communities so that there is a baseline grid. Because I've had communities, and one of the issues you all raised with me on that front line is, in parts of DeKalb, particularly some of our south census tracts, we're finding LLCs, private investors, and Wall Street come in and buy up homes. Now, someone just asked a question concerning non-homeowners being on board, serving on board. To be honest, home ownership is a privilege. Do what you want, but I don't see why a non-homeowner should be on a board.
Gotcha.
That's just a personal opinion. I do not govern what you do, but I'm telling you, in this community, there won't be any. And more you're seeing non-homeowners that are renters in communities because of the huge BFR, buy for rent market that's emerging south of Memorial Drive and throughout South and unincorporated DeKalb. So I saw one community that it created bylaws and sent to me that said no homes could be sold to private equity firms. And believe it or not, you cannot mandate to whom a home is transferred. You can't do that. That buyer, that seller has that inherent right. But what I submitted legislation last year as a part of my legislative packet that would allow us to have a rental registry in the state and in DeKalb. I'm concerned right now with DeKalb. And with the rental registry, if you have a property that is a rental unit, you would be required to register it. So no longer could rental properties hide in plain sight. Since they are a commercial enterprise, give me my taxes, because I got plenty of stuff I need to do around here. We can tax them because they are a business and require that they govern themselves accordingly. But also, and most importantly, when it comes to new counties in DeKalb, new communities in DeKalb, and I would love to hear from you, Councilman Arrington, we have automatic those communities an HOA. We set guidelines that no more than 10%, sometimes even lower, can be owned by non-residents to keep out those private equity firms and investors. We set those as a part of the covenant and conditions. The communities that we are dealing with now that are most vulnerable are the older communities that do not have covenants and conditions. They do not have the HOA. So through a rental registry, each property that is a rental would have to register, and we could then use that data for a defined area to say, you can't buy this home and rent it because we are already at 10% based upon the geography. So trying to be creative in how I deal with folks to shut down what I'm seeing, and I'll be quiet.
Gotcha. Commissioner Arrington, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson kind of threw your name out there, kind of led into some of the things that you do, but we were talking about, how can HOAs or how can communities work with their elected officials to kind of get things done? What's your experience over in Fulton County?
So, number one, governments are responsive, right? So we're going to respond to the requests that come in, right? And so please send the requests on, just like Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. I love to get an email. I never knew how powerful one email could be until I took office. One email could shake up the world. The right email with the right facts and the right information, good Lord, I've seen emails do crazy things. You know, communication, I think, Attorney Williams spoke about that. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson spoke about, you know, the ability to contact government. Again, government's responsive. We're going to respond to the requests that come in. And so please make sure that you share your requests with governments. What we did in my neighborhood, John Whelan at the time was trying to sell the Crown communities, and we had retention and detention ponds that had not been maintained in 20 years. So we called code enforcement on ourselves. And then we took the citation from code enforcement and took it to John Whelan and said, hey, y'all have been responsible for maintaining these, and we just got cited. Who's going to pay for this? And so we were able to negotiate to get them to pay $100,000 or so to clean it out from the 20 years of neglect.
Okay.
Right? But before turning the community and the retention and detention ponds over to us. And so you have to be mindful of that. And I think I saw something in the chat. You also have to be mindful that while the board is nonprofit, you have for-profit management companies and attorney law firms that, are looking for profit centers. They're not looking at your neighbors like they're like the way you should look at your neighbor as a board member. They look at your neighbor as a profit center for their law firm because they're in business to make money. You and your neighbors are there because that's your neighborhood. That's where you live. And so I would just challenge board members to realize that you have the power.
Okay.
I don't know any other way to say this. Mr. Charlie's ice freezes at 32 degrees, just like my ice.
Okay.
You have the power as the board members. You do not have to listen to the management companies and these law firms. You as the board are in control. They work for you. You tell them what to do. They don't tell you what to do. And so part of this is demystifying the process. I'm a big proponent of self-management because guess what? You know how many bills the HOA pays every month? Like 3 to 5. And you can put those 3 to 5 bills on auto pay, bill pay with Bank of America or whoever your bank is. And frankly, I don't know about you, but I don't need any management company to hold my money for me and to take their money out and then pay me. If I'm the HOA, I want to hold the money and I want to write them a check just like I write every other vendor a check. So, and then there's some management companies out here where, imagine this. I had a management company, I asked for a copy of the bank statements and they said, oh, well, those bank accounts are our management company bank accounts. So we don't have to give you a copy of the bank statements.
With your money.
The HOA literally did not have its own bank account. The management company has set up an account for the HOA under their bank account. And so access to bank records wasn't available. And so you just have to be mindful of all the things that exist out here. And, I think as Attorney Williams said, and Attorney Cochran-Johnson, people are in positions, they're your neighbors, and they're there. They may not be there because they want to be there. They may be trying to get out of that position. And so a lot of this boils down, again, to being neighborly, to relationships, and communication.
Yeah.
And transparency.
Yeah. Let me ask this question, and then we're going to go to dig into the chat box a little bit. And this is to Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and Commissioner Arrington. how powerful, you mentioned that one email, how powerful is it if 5 neighbors come to a commission meeting?
You know, one
I
email. Go
I
ahead,
really
Commissioner
wish
Cochran.
more people did attend commission meetings, because I'm convinced, even with my efforts, that so few people really understand what's going on in government. I think it would be enlightening and eye-opening, but I can't emphasize enough when Attorney and Councilman Arrington says that one email can shake up things. It was just one comment when I was running for office in 2018 concerning dollar stores, from a woman who I wish would present herself again and said to me, you know, I'll support you. I'll vote for you if you tell me you know that Family Dollar, Dollar Tree, and Dollar General is not economic development in the Black community. And I had never taken a critical look at what I saw, but I went home, I researched, and 4 years later, we have a law that limits the proliferation of those stores and sets distance requirements. And had it not been for her saying that, it wouldn't have spurred me to action.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
when you have good representation, we should be listening and understanding. And I will also say to you, Mr. Arrington, and to all of you on here, as you interview companies that work with you for HOA rules, in our community, we found out that the company we retained charges a $300 fee per letter. So if they write you, let me be really clear on this, and ask you to pay a fee that is delinquent as of the day the fee was due, each letter they send you, they charge you $300 to send it.
Wow. Wow.
Be careful, read the fine print carefully, because I sat here arguing over something and amassed for myself almost $900 in fees when I did not have a delinquency because of the guy. So
Yeah.
we had to go back and adjust what they did, because, you know, the community, when I said, you know, I don't see, we didn't know.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't read the fine print of the document. So definitely be careful. To all of you out there, you can't create laws that are contrary to the state. And I know that when it comes to the renters and the proliferation in some communities of buy for rent, now there is, pad splits are illegal. If you guys see that there's 5 cars and 7 folks coming and going, let us know. And I'll get on that. We'll get code compliance out there, and sometimes it can be difficult because people sometimes won't open the door, but we'll figure it out,
Gotcha.
because we have to do what we must to keep our communities safe.
Yeah.
Lance, if I could.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can you tell us, Attorney? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to revisit something that Attorney Arrington said that I believe is so important. While it is always great to engage with our government officials, I think it's especially important for homeowners living in HOAs to take heed to what Attorney Arrington said, and that you have the power. That is one of the most important pieces of information that homeowners can walk away with, and that is you decide who the board members are that sit on your board. And I believe that it's also important that HOA elections, the understanding that HOA elections are governed by the documents that create that association. So those governing documents tell you whether there's a quorum required. What is that quorum? I believe that you also should know that you can amend those governing documents. I don't believe that elections should have quorum requirements. We don't have a quorum requirement for our city or our county or our presidential races. If you could imagine, if it were true that we would have an election, and if enough people didn't vote, the person who is in office currently just gets to stay in office. The way that we would have such voter suppression would be incredible, right? We would see people just doing things to make voting much more difficult. We see that here in Georgia. I personally believe we see that in some HOAs. If they know that, hey, if I can just keep us from receiving a certain number of votes, then I get to stay in office. I think that's ludicrous. I think as it relates to elections, those who vote should decide. So if homeowners wish to not participate, then they don't get a say in who actually sits on their board. But for those who vote, we should not be telling homeowners that you vote, but enough of you didn't vote, so now your vote doesn't matter. That is ludicrous. That is one piece of legislation that I would like to see in the General Assembly to cancel out any kind of quorum requirement for an HOA election. Additionally to that, I think it's important to also pay attention to the philosophy of those people who you decide you want to put on the board. It is not just, oh, let me pick this person because they put out the most flyers. The way in which you heard Attorney Arrington speak as to if he is on the board, he is unlikely to want to enforce policies that would foreclose on a homeowner's home because they're going to financial difficulties. You may like that approach. He may be very different than that other board member who wants to say, oh, you owe us $400, despite the fact that we have $2 million sitting in our bank accounts. We want to foreclose on your house because that $400 we want you to pay. That to me is also ludicrous, but currently the law allows if you have a $2,000 delinquency and you're a part of a POA, you can foreclose on somebody's house. A $500,000 house, $1 million house, doesn't matter. They don't take any consideration to how much the property is. They don't take any consideration to, if you're going through some financial hardships, that if you get a judgment and it's above $2,000, a foreclosure can happen. Is that fair? I don't think so. I don't think that takes into consideration all of the circumstances that people go through, short-term, financial burdens that people may experience. But then you have a board who has this authority that if I like you, I can give you a pass. If I like you, or if I understand I'm more compassionate about your personal situation, then I can give you a pass. I won't take you to the attorney. I won't have you incurring all these collection fees. But if you have spoken up too loudly at a board meeting or at an HOA meeting, or if you're against the policies that this particular board is trying to put forward, then maybe I'm a little bit more to the book and to the rules and really much more strict on how I enforce our governing documents against you. That is problematic to me. And I tell homeowners that one of the things, and Attorney Arrington spoke on this, is that you do not work for the management company. You do not work for the attorneys representing you. Should you take their advice? You're paying them because you're paying for their experience, their understanding, their perspective. However, you are the final decision maker. You could be in litigation and you can stop litigation at any time. You can be enforcing a fine and you can stop that fine at any time. It is so frustrating to me when I come into communities, whether I'm consulting or if I'm being looked at to actually represent that community, when I hear board members say, oh, I don't know, the management company decided that. How? The management company can't decide anything. No covenant that you will look at says that the management company gets to make the rules for that community. Those rules are made by the board. And unfortunately, there's not enough board training for people who are taking on this large responsibility, sometimes these large budgets, and they don't necessarily understand where their authority lies, that they are the decision makers. Those 5 to 7, 9 people, they get to decide, am I going to do it this way or not? And I believe that it's so important that you have informed board members who understand those covenants, who understand their duties and responsibilities. And you have a community who says that, yes, we're going to take charge of our community. Almost every governing document that I've ever seen in an association has the ability for homeowners to recall any board member that they believe is not serving, in
Sure.
their best interests. Utilize those resources, utilize that information. And I think that's so important. I just wanted to touch on that, Lance, and then you can.
Well, thank you for getting that in there, because that is important. Who owns the board? Who does the community belong to? Basically, is what you're saying. It belongs to the homeowners. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Arrington to talk a little bit about his boot camp, and we are going to go and grab some questions here and kind of get that going. But Commissioner Arrington, can you talk a little bit about the boot camp and training, because it did come up in the conversation?
Yes, no, absolutely happy to do it. In 2012, 2013, I was living in my HOA, and I was like Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. My ex-wife said that's the house we were getting, and that's the house we got. And it didn't matter whether even if I had read the rules, it wouldn't have mattered. But you have to read the rules. You have to understand the rules. The bylaws of most associations are Georgia nonprofit corporations. And so the bylaws of the corporation talk about how the company will govern itself. The Declaration of Protective Covenants are the use and land rules that run with the land. And so we've seen, part of the reason that we're seeing the things that we're seeing with HOAs now is because they're really just growing up. Right? So before HOAs, we had co-ops, and co-ops were around and they lasted a while. And there's still some places in New York and other places around the country, even here in Georgia, where there are a few cooperative communities. But HOA has taken over and they've come in. Hey, we're going to buy this land. We're going to have some common area. And so the HOA dues are really all about, hey, how do we maintain the common areas, the signage out front, the clubhouse, the pool, the tennis courts? How do we maintain enough money to keep those going? And frankly, most of the places that have all these management companies and these law firms, if they took that money and put that money on their amenities, they'd be in much better shape. In my association, we took over the board, and in 6 months, we saved $100,000 and put it into a capital account. And we still maintain the $40,000 that was in our operating account. Okay. And they had the management company had the law firm suing a lady that had filed bankruptcy for $70, and they paid her $5,000. They paid the law firm $5,000 to try to get $70 from a lady that was in bankruptcy that no longer lived in the community and hadn't lived there in 10 years.
Wow.
Maybe John Whelan can afford that, but Marvin Arrington can't afford that. I don't want to be a part of that collection effort. And so, we just have to do what we can to be mindful of all of these things that are going on. There's so many chances. And the problem, if you can't have a quorum, you can't amend the bylaws. If you can't get 25%, you're not going to ever get 66 2/3% to amend the bylaws, right? Unless you go buy a Popeyes or something. But no, seriously. It's and it also depends on the size of your community. Imagine if you're in a community there's 1,200 people versus a community that's 120 people. In a community of 120 people, you might be able to get that quorum. In a community of 1,200, you might not be able to get the quorum. And so you just have to really read your rules, know the rules, understand the rules, and do your best to enforce them in a neighborly manner. The management companies and a lot of the management companies and a lot of the law firms are looking at your neighbors as profit centers. And as board members, I need you to look at them as neighbors.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Carla and Cynthia, can you guys grab some of the questions out the chat? And during this conversation, we'll let you guys grab the questions, but Representative Davis and Senator Butler, before we get done, I'd like for you guys to make a comment, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about, we need a little help from under the gold dome to kind of get some of these things done. And I will share this video with you so you can kind of grab some of the key points of the video. Let's take a question. Carla or Cynthia, can you?
Yes, Lance. So a lot of the questions our speakers have already touched on. One question, there are a few questions about voting rights. So I'll just read one of them. Are voting rights of dissenting residents suppressed by declaring a resident membership in bad standing, resulting in the suspension of voting rights? This is one of a few that are asking about voting rights, but this one in particular about dissenting residents.
So unfortunately, that's what happens. And unfortunately, that's the way the rules are written for most of these HOAs, which is one of the reasons why I think an ombudsman, and an ombudsman is a neutral party that would, negotiate, would be helpful, because unfortunately, sometimes it may be the people that are doing that and being spiteful, but most of the time it's just the way the system is set up. The system is just set up that way. The covenants are worded that way. It's in the written covenants. And so at that point, they can just say, well, we're just following the rules. And so that's why I think we do need some uniformity, and we need to kind of relook and rethink a lot of these rules.
Gotcha. Next question from the chat, ladies.
There, I don't know, Carla, if you don't have one, I can say another one.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Cynthia.
There is a question that, even though we touched on the renters, there is another question. How do you deal with renters, absent owners who are not really invested in the community? And this is coming from a homeowner.
I would just address that really quickly. I've carried this philosophy that I say that whether it's a homeowner or a renter in that property, if you are enforcing the rules, then who occupies the interior should be of lesser concern, because if the grass isn't cut, does it matter to you if it's the owner or the tenant that's not cutting the grass? I have seen some tenants who take better care and responsibility of a home than homeowner does. I mean, it's about instead of painting with such a broad brush, I believe that you enforce the rules that enhance the quality of life in your community. What type of community do you want to be? If the property is not being maintained, if you are under an HOA, you go after the owner and the tenant for failing to maintain the property. This is an effort that must be carried out by an involved community. I see on my street, for instance, in my HOA, I tell the story a lot because it's just so true. One neighbor got their roof done, looked really nice. The next neighbor next door to them was like, oh, wow, their house looks so nice. I'm about to get my roof done. They started painting the houses and making sure that they were, up to date. When one person on that street started doing it, it sort of had this ripple effect. And that's what I believe that these boards and the HOA should be encouraging. Let's encourage, a lot of communities used to do like yard of the month. I don't know, I haven't seen that a lot anymore, but yard of the month, recognizing the behaviors that you want to have replicated so that it enhances the value and the quality of life in your community. And it's the same thing on the bad side. If you allow certain behaviors to go unaddressed, it can have a ripple effect. If I allow my grass to grow knee high, then my neighbor might say, well, look, I would cut my grass today, but if their grass looks like that, then maybe I'll just cut mine on next Tuesday. And so just enforce your rules in a way that encourages the outcomes that you're seeking. And I think you'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia, another question?
Yes, someone is asking a question to the panelists. How many homeowners are in your HOA? You may have already mentioned that, but if you could again.
I believe we have about 240, I believe is our number, 230, 240 in mind.
Yeah, I have
And-
about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I hear in this side, we have 56 homes. We're small.
Yeah, and in my HOA, I have about 200 currently. In my current HOA, my former HOA was about 250.
Okay. Okay. Cynthia, next question.
Okay, this is one maybe hitting home to you, Lance. Question was, I was told Water's Edge had become a POA instead of an HOA. If anyone is able to clarify when and how did our HOA become a POA, which allows foreclosures for a collection? And then the same question, wanted to know if it was indeed true.
Well, I'm not on the board, so I don't know. My bill says Water's Edge HOA. Panelists,
So
is it
what I can,
about neighborhoods going from HOAs to POAs?
so yeah, let me talk on that briefly. You want to be very careful, okay? I have a case right now where the Declaration of Protective Covenants says that the declarant can make changes to the declaration at any time they want to, okay? The wording is a little unclear, but it also says that the board can make changes with the declarant's approval. Well, the declarant was gone 10 years ago, and they just changed to a POA last week. So that means they did not have the declarant's approval. Not only that, the document that they filed with the clerk showing that they had 2/3 of the board members is in direct contradiction to the specific language in the declaration that says 2/3 of the members are required to amend the declaration and or the bylaws. And so I think, so there are, again, for-profit companies, law firms and management companies that are pushing HOAs to turn to POAs because that's a profit center. That's a profit center for them. Okay. So they push you to turn to that, and then they can take your house, or they can let the association or someone else come and take your house if they foreclose. The reason they want to go to POAs is because they want the ability to foreclose. Now, I get it. You got to pay for the amenities, right? You need people, everyone needs to pay their dues. Dues are mandatory. In 99% of these associations, dues are mandatory. So even if you object, you have to pay your dues and object. Okay. So, but again, we just have to really be mindful because there's so many traps that get you over into a POA, and then they can foreclose on your home. And so in this case, not only did the board not have the power was vested in the homeowners, but because they saw they attempted to exploit a discrepancy that said the board could do it with declarant approval.
Wow.
And so you really have to be careful. I had another one where the declarant's right to appoint board members expired in 2008. The homeowners came to me in 2014. They should have had control 6 years earlier, and he was still making decisions. So you have to know your documents backwards and forwards for your association, even if you're like me and Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and you don't read them.
So if my HOA goes from a HOA to a POA, do they have to send me a letter saying that that's what they did or not?
Let me tell you something. It's virtually impossible for your HOA to go to a POA because 99% of them need the affirmative vote of 2/3 of all homeowners to do it.
Right.
And unless you've got 100 homeowners left, it's not real likely that you're ever going to be able to achieve that
Okay.
unless
But
the
it-
declarant changes it. The declarant has the right to change it at any time.
Mhm.
but Lance, to your question, I don't see how it could have changed without you having received something. There should have been a vote, or it was already done before, like you said,
Mhm.
like by the declarant before, the control was turned over to the homeowners. But if there is going to be a vote to modify it after the declarant is no longer in position, then you definitely should have known about it, because there should have been some voting that took place where the members have approved this amendment to modify the declaration to make it from an HOA into
Deal.
itself into the POA.
And in order to vote, you have to get notice of the meeting and notice of the election. So it might be 2 or 3 notices that have to come before you actually get to that point. So it's virtually impossible for someone to say that their HOA turned to a POA and there was no vote of the homeowners unless there's some sneaky stuff going on.
Okay.
And absolutely, I have the copy in there because I hear, but when I hear, I look for what I'm not hearing. And that's just not an action that one can take. A group can't just arbitrarily choose to change from an HOA to a POA. Somewhere along the line, there should have been notice given. And, Mr. Williams, I'll say, I guess being in government and because of how I think and as it relates to making of laws, I'm always for that majority. I really am when it comes to, and it's a beautiful thing. Some folks disagree and still agree. But I do like to see that majority vote be present. And let me say to you all, if it requires you to pay attention and show up only to take the vote and go home, do what you need to do to have your voice heard so that you do have that quorum or there is that majority to get things moving along. But, Mr. Arrington, I know a situation that you're dealing with now as an attorney here in DeKalb. And there's a lot of creative ways out there to take property, literally, that is occurring in communities. So please be very mindful of what is going on around you, best practices, ask questions, and make sure you're present so that you understand. Because I'm at a loss of words on this HOA to a POA. Doesn't sound like that's possible, but I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Let me do this. If you are part of a HOA or community, say if you're a board member, please put that in the chat. The Rockbridge Coalition would like to connect with your community. So put your name, your position on your board in your community, and your contact information in the chat, and then we'll reach out to you. Cynthia, we can take one more question. Then I want to let Representative Davis or Senator Butler make a comment, and then we'll go to closing comments if we can.
There's a couple questions about those who are not on the panelists about the board of if the HOAs for Southland or Deer Creek or any others were invited. It's a few questions that have come in the chat and directly to me. So I guess the better way to ask the question is for those who are not here, Southland or Deer Creek, was there a reason, or is it a reason why it was just limited to?
No, there are people. I recognize names of people who registered from Southland and Deer Creek.
Okay.
Especially Deer Creek. I mean, Deer Creek, well, Priscilla Brown, she's from Deer Creek. Jackie Steele, Deer Creek, she registered. So in the Deer Creek community, that's really that's my example of a HOA that's got it rocking, because they were the ones that kind of got me fired up about getting the Rockbridge Coalition going when they were fighting against Amazon putting a driveway in front of your neighborhood, English manner. And they
Yes,
showed up in force. But no, everybody was invited. The Rockbridge Coalition, we have neighborhoods that are part of our list. Cynthia is our secretary. Everybody that we had information we sent to, we had 125 people register for the event. So no, it was not a small group of people just calling this meeting. It was open to everyone as far as participating in this meeting. Another
Thank
question,
you.
Cynthia? And then we'll,
Well, I think that follow-up question was, and it seems to be the one that continues to come up about getting people involved. The question that came along with the who was invited is, how do you get people motivated to join the HOA or the BOD, excuse me, and become active on the board? Someone's comment with that question is that it becomes draining to always see the same people. I think we've answered that, but
yeah, well, let me just make this comment. I'm gonna go back to my friends at Deer Creek. They have, I don't know if it's still the case, but at one time they had a block captain on every block. And they were able to accomplish that as far as how they communicate. And trying to think of the HOA president over there. Priscilla helped me out, but they were really instrumental in really working to get their block captains and knowing each other done. Now it's a little smaller than Water's Edge or Southland or maybe Winbrook, but I mean, there are examples where people get out there and get it done. And you just have to get out there and get it done. Like Commissioner Arrington was saying, you may have to stand in front of the subdivision and pass out roses and donuts to get it done, but maybe that's the way we have to do so. But let me do this. Representative Davis, would you like to make a comment before we go to closing remarks? Cynthia, can you unmute her? There you go. Representative Davis, thank you for joining us.
Well, I was not expecting to speak, but thank you anyway. I want to say thank you for having this town hall, Lance Hammond, and everyone else. You had an outstanding panelist. To tell you the truth, we were supposed to have a housing hearing with Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson and Commissioner Marvin Arrington before we had an emergency and we had to postpone. There has been several committee hearings, both Republican and Democrat in the Senate, on the issue of housing crisis. Now, a lot of the things that was mentioned during this meeting, we placed in House Bill 303. And I want to let you know right now, no sooner that we drop that bill, the Georgia Builders Association opposes it and have it in their publication. We have a full agenda of, or should I say, we have drafted legislation in a number of areas, even dealing with apartment rentals. And we already have people in full opposition to everything that we're drafting. We need everyone to be involved and on board, because right now, under the Gold Dome, they are trying to tie the hands of these commissioners with preemption bills so that they cannot regulate anything. This is probably one of the worst things they can do. And it's one of the reasons we try to stay in communication so that the commissioners and the local governments and the city council knows that there are state legislators who want to make sure that they don't have no say what goes on in local communities. So please stay involved and stay up to date, and we'll try and do our best to keep you informed of the next housing hearing. It should be coming up soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Butler. Unmute yourself, Senator Butler. Or Cynthia, there you go.
Good evening to everyone. It's great to see all of you and listen to all of your comments. I have to say that the panel has been outstanding. And I've learned a lot this evening from all three of you on different HOAs and how they operate. But one of my suggestions, and thanks to the members of Water's Edge that have put this panel together and brought people together on today. I noticed that it was some 85 people on the town hall this evening, which is a good number, but it's not enough still. More of the community could be involved so that they could learn more about how homeowners associations work as well. And I'd like to commend Representative Davis, my colleague from the House, on her bill. I did pull it up, but since it has 36 pages, I couldn't read it that fast. But I will take a look at it and see if I can support that if it should ever come out of committee. It's been read twice, but it's in committee, and most likely with the opposition that she has, she can talk about it, have town hall meetings, and even have meetings at the Capitol to bring attention to it and get more support. And as she said to you all, to support her in that effort, make some noise, come to the meetings, and let them know at the Gold Dome that you mean business. But I also wanted to commend Commissioner Arrington on his work with the HOAs and people that bring those issues to him. And I was thinking when he said there were 12,000 sets of rules for HOAs, that in our state, we could probably bring some HOAs together and go through the rules to see what we have in common and what we don't have in common, and see if we can put some of those things together so that some of the HOAs or all of the HOAs can be doing the same thing. It appeared, I did serve on my board over where I live for 5 years when I found out it was 5 years, because I wasn't paying attention to the time I got off the board, so someone else could serve. But you know, time go by so fast, you just don't pay attention, especially in the legislature and serving in your community. You just do what you have to do when you have to do it. But I think that some of the rules that we have here at Southland and rules that you may have at Water's Edge may be some of the same things, and then some may not be. And some of that could be brought together so that communities can work closer together and understand what the HOA is all about. Those monies that you pay into HOAs go for those important things that you want to see. As Attorney Williams was saying, you do the kinds of things that you live the way you want to see yourself live and include your neighbors, so that once one thing starts that's good, someone else would see it and they would join in. So I think that if we could bring some of these rules together, that we could have a better community, have better communities throughout. And I hope I can see that happen. And Roderick Frison is on here as well. And he made a good comment about not concentrating so much on collecting the fees, but show people what their monies really go towards.
Okay.
When people can see that their monies have made a difference, then they will most likely have more input and come together with those that are trying to make our communities better. So thank you all so very much. I enjoyed many comments and hope that we can start to come together more often and make more things happen and make some changes. Because there are some things that I disagree with that we have in our HOA rules. And so, but we still have to follow the law. And whatever the law is, that's what we got to do. But we can make some changes and make some differences in our communities. So thank you all so much for having this panel this evening. And as I said earlier, I hope we can do it again and come up with some real solutions
Gotcha.
and not just talk.
Thank you, Senator. And we are going to get some action done after this conversation. Let's do this. I'm going to ask the panelists if you could just kind of give us some parting comments and thoughts about our discussion today, and maybe some action steps or next steps that you see that we may be able to take going forward. So let's start with Attorney Williams.
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure hearing from so many people with so many different insights and very valuable information. I think one of the things that I would ask that everyone walks away from this meeting with is an understanding that in your community, you have the power. You have the power to decide what your community is going to look like. You have the power to decide what kind of rules you're going to be governed by. And I would ask that you exercise that power, that this should not be a situation where you have an association or a board versus the homeowners. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. This community is about working together. The board should be doing what's in the best interest of the community, and recognizing that you are not the employees of your management company or of your law office who's representing you. Do those things in your community that you want to see replicated. Really stand up and say, hey, if you want to get your neighborhood watch going and reinvigorate it, then do that. If you want to, have community events. I'm really proud of my community. We do a lot of community based things. We have cookouts, we have gatherings, pool parties, teaching lessons to students and to children in our communities for tennis. I mean, just those types of things are the things that you want to replicate. Get to know your neighbor, meet your neighbor, know your neighbor on both sides. That can go a long way. And just be involved. I mean, if your community is not there yet, somebody has to, take the mantle and run with it, and then just watch others, tend to fall in line and want to do that as well. I don't think people are ignoring their communities intentionally. Most people we have busy lives. We work. You have children. You have relationships. Other hobbies, and those are all great things to have. And just don't exclude people because they may not be at the community meeting all the time. But help them stay involved. Offer different methods of involvement. Like this Zoom meeting, we've had a good participation in this Zoom meeting. And those of you who were responsible for putting this together, I applaud you. But just imagine if we had tried to get this many people to come to a specific location and say, hey, we need to have our meeting, at this location. Many people would not have just been able to make it. So be thoughtful about how you are encouraging others to participate. If you have elections and if your particular community requires a quorum, be thoughtful. This is 2023. Do you have electronic voting in your community? If not, why not? Are you making it more difficult for people to participate in the process? If so, why are you doing that when you don't have to? Boards have the authority, they have the power, there are resources out there, there's channels out there to make voting and participation much more accessible. We've already seen what it looks like to have voter suppression efforts go on in our government. And we don't need to replicate those types of efforts in our communities. People might think, oh, well, if you really care, you would just participate. Well, it's not always that simple. Have empathy for your neighbors. I think Attorney Arrington talked about being neighborly, making that be how we start, and being considerate for each other. So I hope this conversation continues, but not just here in this forum, not just with your elected officials, but have it continue in your own personal communities. Start off with the street that you live on, the neighbors who are on either side of you. Start there. And when you start there, just watch it just bloom into something great. And you begin to start developing those neighborhoods that you're happy to call home and that you're happy to live in, and you're looking out for one another. this shouldn't be a hard task, but it does take work. And you have a lot of good people here, a lot of good government officials who have spoken to you, made themselves available to you. I saw the commissioners put their information in the chat saying that they'll set up meetings for you. Take advantage of those opportunities, because it's really about building that community that you want to be in. And I applaud all of you for taking out, the time to be a part of this, and for all the participants who gave up their time so unselfishly just to share knowledge. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. Thanks, Lance, and all the others who
comments.
put this together.
Thank you. Commissioner Arrington, some parting words and advice for the participants.
I guess first and foremost, thank you to you and the Rockbridge Coalition for organizing this very informative community panel, community engagement panel. The people that are here aren't the ones that really need to hear this, right? These are the people that are active. These are the people that are going to vote. But you are the people that need to hear it, because you have to go out and motivate others to vote. I did take a few notes here. I just wanted to make sure I say a few things. Number one, to all the board members, congratulations, you're on the board, and condolences, you will be on the board for the rest of your life. Number two, the U.S. Treasury, as part of the ARPA funds, the ARPA funds, allocated $354 million to the state of Georgia to help homeowners with mortgage assistance. Not only will it pay for your past due mortgage up to 18 or 24 months, but it will also pay your past HOA dues. So if you are in a lawsuit and you are being foreclosed on, go to georgiamortgageassistance.ga.gov. I put the link in the chat. Again, that's georgiamortgageassistance.ga.gov. When we spoke with them, or when they came out to speak with us in November, they had $300 million left. They only spent $54 million. So there's a roughly 250, probably to $300 million still remaining, and each homeowner can get up to $50,000. Email your commissioners, legislators, and local officials, and we will certainly be supporting the bills at the State House, and Senator Butler and Representative Davis and others, because it's really, I think, going to take state law. And if one email can work wonders, imagine what would happen if all of us emailed the state legislators once a week. Imagine if we got all 3 million Georgians to email the state legislators, right? And so we need to be mindful of that. Number four, I'll leave you with this. I have 3 rules, and it applies to the HOA, but it also applies to life. Lead, follow, or get out the way. Last but not least, be neighborly. Be neighborly in everything you do. Remember the power. The board has all of the power. The law firms and the management companies work for you. They will do what you tell them to do. You just need to know that you have the authority and the right to tell them what to do. No, I'm not going to take my home, foreclose on my neighbor's house. No, they've been living in that house for 30 years and raised their children there. For $200 for some letters, for $300 a letter, because you sent them 6 letters, you want me to foreclose on their house? No, thank you. I'm in charge. I'm on the board. I'm not going to vote to support that. So certainly be mindful of that, and be neighborly in everything you do. It's all about being neighborly. And I'll leave it there. We do have, you can go to our website. I put that in the chat as well. We started a nonprofit in 2013 called the HOA Alliance. And it's really just about neighbors helping neighbors.
Thank you, Commissioner Arrington. Good advice. I made my notes here, so I've got your notes, and thank you. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, closing comments.
Yes, and I'll make sure the Georgia Mortgage Assistance.ga.gov is in my newsletter this week, so that you guys can just click and go over and make applications. We've had good conversation here, but I know a lot of people are dealing with some real life issues. And a large part of the problem that I've seen in DeKalb is the policy. The laws that govern the community are antiquated and to community. When you have external people that do not live in a community that have the capacity to serve on a board, especially with communities that are the size of Water's Edge, that just makes no sense. Now, I don't think per se that at the time certain policies and laws were written, the outcome was expected. I'd like to believe that's not the case right now with what we see with the legislation that bars rental registries and prohibits us from setting a rental rate cap. Okay, I didn't talk about that. But my concern for DeKalb is honestly, I believe we truly need to be more proactive with our HOAs, and we need to have an attorney who reviews HOA documents. Currently, we only receive them, but we don't say that these documents aren't decent and in order, and we don't talk to you about best practices. So that's where I'm going to focus my attention. I will probably be reaching out more, Councilman and Attorney Arrington, because until we get through Brandon Hill, we've not talked about that, but I'm very close to that community. I'm actually going over there, believe this weekend, to sit with these folks, because regardless of what we may think of their environment, that's their home. And I'm very clear on how it got to the condition it did. So with that said, I will close. I'm available to anyone that needs me. I've tried to present some solutions here to ever-present matters, and I'll just look forward to hearing from you. One thing I say, don't give up, even in the midst of adversity. You can't do that. We just need to persevere, fight through it. And if it requires a majority to have a quorum to vote, then you get a quorum. It ought to be just that important. So let's try articulating and mobilizing, and I'll look forward to doing that with all of you. Okay?
Thank you, Commissioner. And final words from the Rockbridge Coalition. We want to thank all of our panelists, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, Commissioner Arrington, Attorney Williams for joining the call and providing great dialogue and guidance to the community on what we should be thinking about. But I think one of the key messages that came out of this is that, we need to work with each other because we are neighbors. And so let's kind of keep that in mind. The Rockbridge Coalition, we need more volunteers. We try to push out different things on education and whatever, but we're trying to engage the community in the issues that make our community better. So when you get an email from us or we ask you to show up somewhere, keep us in mind. We're trying to work to get some things done. We're working in the schools. We have an education committee. We have a zoning committee. We have a beautification committee. We have all these different committees and places that you can work and join and volunteer. And Cynthia put in the chat how you can volunteer with the Rockbridge Coalition. So our numbers do matter, and your voice matters, and we need your voice along with our voice so we can make a mighty noise and get something done in our community. Because I heard Commissioner Cochran-Johnson say it in one of her talks, nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. Nobody's coming to make our community better. We have to make our community better ourselves. So with that being said, thank you for joining the call. Great number of people joined. We'll double that the next time. But again, thank you guys for joining the call. Keep the Rockbridge Coalition in mind. Pray for your associations. Pray for your neighbors and everybody that's involved in making your community better, because it's not an easy job no matter which side you're on. So with that being said, have a good evening, be blessed, and this video will be available to everyone who registered, and we'll put it up on our website, the rockbridgecoalition.org. So thank you guys for joining and have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night, everyone. Have a
Thank-
great one.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rod. We'll talk soon, brother.
Okay.
I appreciate the invite.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Carl, you still on?
I am. I didn't know if you wanted to hang, did you want us to hang
Yeah,
back?
hang on, but stop the recording.
Okay.